Thank you, Ray. As Ray said, my name is Breda Kennedy and I work in the Authorisations and Reliefs Unit of Customs Division. So during this presentation, I just want to give you a high-level overview of two special procedures, customs special procedures, and they may be beneficial to your company from the 1st of January, depending on your business model. Both procedures involve duty suspension or relief. So I'll start with the inward processing procedure. So what this authorisation allows is it allows your goods to be imported and processed with the customs duty and the VAT suspended. Inward processing, it can be anything from a very simple repackaging operation to a very complicated manufacturing operation. The EU legislation, it sets down when economic conditions are deemed to be fulfilled for IP. And normally, if it's non-sensitive goods, this can be, just once you're carrying out a processing or a repair operation. But it should be noted that there are separate, stricter economic conditions associated with sensitive goods. That would include the likes of meat, egg, rice, dairy. So in the example I've shown on this slide, we're looking at pharmaceutical raw materials being imported and they're being processed then into tablets or medicine. So the duty rate for the raw material would be in around 6.5%, but the finished product has a zero duty rate. So you can see the advantage here if the goods are imported, the duty is suspended and the finished product is released to free circulation and the duty rate is zero. It's very important to have the correct classification codes, both for your raw material and your processed product, when you're making an application for an inward processing authorisation. So our classification unit in NENA can provide some advice if you run into a bit of trouble there. There are a few options for releasing or discharging the inward processing procedure. It can be, the processed product can be released to free circulation on the EU market with the duty and VAT based on the processed product. So that's like the example I've shown here. So the duty rate would be on the tablets and medicine. You can also have the duty, if the processed product is liable to duty, you can apply to pay the duty on the actual raw material, the imported raw material, and only on the actual amount contained in the processed product. Now, this would be an option that you'd have to apply for and set down when you're making your application. The processed product could also be re-exported outside the EU, and the re-exportation there would discharge any duty or VAT liability. So if you're importing goods from the UK to be processed and you're re-exporting back outside the EU, then that means that the duty and the VAT liability would be discharged. So just moving on to the next slide here, if you wish to submit an application for inward processing, you do it on the EU system, the customs decision system. And I'm showing the path here of how to get to the customs decision system. It's customs traders and agents page, processing goods, end use and warehousing. And that will get you then to the customs decision system page. And the next slide shows when you log into the customs decision system, this is the page you will see, and this is your entry to the trader portal. So once you've completed the 3 questions here, and the 3 questions are just, the first one is asking the domain, and that would be customs. The second question is you just select the country, so from a drop-down list you select Ireland, and the third is select the type of actor, so it could be economic operator. And once you submit that, you'll be asked to download your ROS cert. And once you've done that, you're actually into where you can actually make your application on the customs decision system. So if you're interested in inward processing, you can select inward processing from the drop-down list. And once you've completed your application and submitted it, it's only at that stage then that revenue can see the application for examination. When you're entering it on your trader portal, we don't actually see the information until you've finally submitted it to the CDS. There's EU legislated timeframes for customs to make decisions on these applications. So if we have a fully completed application, that when it has all the details we require, we have 30 days to accept that application. And then once that application is accepted, we can have a time frame of 30 to 60 days to make a decision. Now that's, I suppose, they're the timeframes legislated within the EU that decisions have to be made. Sometimes they can be made quicker depending on how the application goes. I just remind you about Slido. Ray mentioned it there a few minutes ago. If you want to submit any questions, we'll have a question and answer section after the presentation. So if you just go to slido.com and the event code is R184. So if I just talk you through how the application process works. When we've received a fully completed application from you on the customs decision system and we've accepted it, the next thing that happens is it's forwarded to the customs control officer for your company. And the control officer will actually carry out an evaluation of the application, and this would include a visit to your company. There will be many things for discussion during that visit, that initial visit, but just to give an example, the control officer would look at the records you keep, because under this authorisation, you have to submit a document. It's called a bill of discharge at an agreed time frame. And really what the bill of discharge is it gives you details of all the import declarations declaring the goods under inward processing and shows the movement of the goods until they're discharged, either by release to the EU market or they could be re-exported. And it'll be the same control officer that will actually be examining the bill of discharge as you submit it. There'll be a frequency agreed, like the bill of discharge could be submitted monthly or quarterly. And so it'll be the same customs control officer you'll be dealing with throughout your authorisation. And we find that any of the companies authorised for the special procedures, they have a very good working relationship with their control officer. And this is the first point of contact for anything got to do with the obligations or any queries on the actual authorisation. The control officer would also discuss the period of discharge, and what this is it's the length of time from when the goods are actually imported, so when they're put under inward processing procedure, processed and then discharged from the procedure. Normally, I suppose the standardised period of discharge is 6 months, but it can vary sometimes. Rate of yield would also be agreed. Now, what the rate of yield is, it means the quantity of processed products obtained from the processing of a specific amount of raw material imported. So if I just give I suppose, a very simple example, if you were importing 100 litres of liquid raw material, and that makes 90 litres of the processed product, there could be 10% evaporated during the processing. The rate of yield in this case would be 90%. So as I said, the initial stage then once the application is accepted is the control officer going out to your company, and if there's anything you want clarified or you want to ask about the obligations under your authorisation, you can have your chat with your control officer, but that will be, the control officer will be your point of contact for your authorisation throughout. Security is required to cover the suspended duty, and it's in the form of a comprehensive guarantee. And the reference amount for the guarantee would also be discussed during the control officer's visit. When the control officer is visiting, there should be the application for the inward processing and the application for the comprehensive guarantee. Now, I'll be talking more about comprehensive guarantee at session 10 later on this evening, so I'll give more detail on it. But the control officer would look from the records of the company and look at the maximum value of goods that would be under IP over the previous 12 months. And it's normally the last day of the calendar month that the control officer would examine and see the highest stock records. So to determine the guarantee reference amount, if we just take an example, if the maximum value of the goods under IP at the given point in time was €50,000 and the highest duty rate was 10,000, the guarantee reference amount there could be €5,000. A comprehensive guarantee can be put in place in the form of a cash deposit, which is lodged to a revenue account, or it can also be an undertaking from a financial institution. But as I said, there'll be more detail on comprehensive guarantee at session 10. Now, in order to place your goods under the procedure, the inward processing procedure, you have to lodge a customs declaration to the automated import system. The H4 is the name of the customs declaration that puts goods under inward processing. And it's very important that this declaration is completed correctly. you will have an authorisation number for your inward processing that would have been generated when you were authorised from the customs decision system. So that authorisation number has to be quoted on the H4 declaration. Your CN, your classification codes for your materials, will have to be correct as included on the authorisation. If they're not, the actual declaration will be rejected. So that completes the presentation on inward processing. So I'm now going to move on to the second special procedure we're covering in this presentation, and that's outward processing. Outward processing is another customs special procedure, and what this allows is EU goods can be exported from the Union to a third country, such as Great Britain, to undergo processing operations, and then they're returned to the EU as a processed product. So if I just run through the example shown, this is cloth being exported to Great Britain, and then it's returned to the EU as suits. So just to know, under outward processing, it's not necessary that the receipts are returned back to the same member state. There can be multiple member states involved. So, for example, the cloth could be exported under outward processing from Ireland to GB, and the suits could be imported back into France. So if, in this example, France would need to be included on the Irish outward processing authorisation. So if you were making your application for outward processing and you were doing that, you'd need to include those details in your application that you're planning on discharging it in another member state, because at that stage the Irish Customs, we will consult with, say, the French authorities on the application before any authorisation issues. And as the slide shows, on re-importation back into the EU, duty is only charged on the cost of the processing works carried out in the third country or GB. So if I just give a simple example again, if the cloth was valued at €100 at export and the rate of yield is 10 suits for that €100, the cost of processing could be charged by the manufacturer in GB at €500 for the 10 suits. So the value of the suits coming in would be €600, but the system will deduct the price of the cloth, and it's just the €500 that would be liable to the customs duty. It's the cost of the processing, so you're not actually paying duty on the full amount. Now, again, I won't go into great detail on this slide because it's the same path. If you want to lodge an application for outward processing, you can go onto the Revenue website, Customs Traders and Agents, Processing Goods, End Use and Warehousing, and there's a lot more information on all of these procedures at that page as well. But that will lead you then to the Customs Decision System, and which will bring you here to the entry to the Trader portal. So as I said, you complete that, upload your ROS cert, and you're ready then to select outward processing from the applications. There are different timeframes laid down in the EU legislation for accepting an application and making a decision on an application, but the timelines are actually the same for inward processing and outward processing. So once we've received a fully completed application with all the details required, we have 30 days to accept that application, and then we have 30 days with the possibility to extend by another 30 days to make the decision. So there's possible 60 days to make the decision. Again, if that length of time isn't required, we don't need to use the full time frame. That's just what's legislated for customs have to make the decision. So as I said with the inward processing, once we've accepted the application, the fully completed application, the next step is the Customs Control Officer visiting your company, and they'll be carrying out an evaluation of the application. So they would check that the operation's being carried out just to ensure that outward processing is a viable option. They discuss the items like the records, the rate of yield, and any other issues that are obligations that are required under the authorisation. The good news with outward processing is that for standard outward processing, a comprehensive guarantee authorisation isn't required. So it's because it's EU goods being exported, there isn't the risk of any duty suspended. So it just means that the standard outward processing authorisations tend to be able to be processed and issued a little bit faster than the others because we're not waiting for the comprehensive guarantee authorisation. So to declare your goods to outward processing, an export declaration must be lodged to the AEP system when the goods are being exported, and it's very important that the correct codes are used for outward processing. The details of all these codes are available on the Revenue website. The authorisation number must be included on the declaration, and the CN codes, the classification codes that are listed on the authorisation, so that the goods can enter the outward processing procedure. And again, if the incorrect CN codes are listed, the declaration will be rejected. So that's when the goods are being exported. So then when the goods are coming back into the EU, an import declaration is submitted to the automated import system, and that's when the finished product is being re-imported. So this will discharge the outward processing procedure, and once the correct codes are used, as detailed in the authorisation, the duty will be based on the cost of the processing carried out. So in summary, if you think inward processing or outward processing authorisations would be beneficial to your company from the 1st of January, you should identify first the products and have your correct classification codes for them. Have a look at the Revenue website. There's a lot more information on these special procedures on the Revenue website, and make your application on the Customs Decision System. If you have any queries or want any advice on these, or if you included the email address there for the authorisations and reliefs unit who have responsibility for these special procedures. And just to remember that the inward processing authorisation requires a comprehensive guarantee, and that can take a little bit of time, and we'll cover more on the comprehensive guarantee in session 10. You should also consider then who will complete the customs obligations, such as lodging the declarations, and there's obligations on record keeping and submission of bill of discharge for these procedures. So it's just a decision that needs to be made whether you will do that in-house or whether you appoint a customs agent. And if I could just stress, if you are interested in these authorisations and you want it up and running for the 1st of January, now is the time to make the application. You can see there's a few different steps involved, and if you need to get an undertaking from a financial institution, that can take time as well. So to make contact now if you're interested in inward processing or outward processing. So thank you for your attention, and we'll now go to the Q&A section. Thank you. Sorry.
That's great, Breda. Thanks very much. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first Q&A panel for today's technical sessions. It's going to be quite an intense day for any of you who will be staying with us for the day. We'll have 10 back-to-back technical sessions, and we have subject matter experts for each of the themes that we will be covering. So thanks to Breda for the presentation, and I'd like to welcome Rose Finn, who's one of our SMEs for this topic, for the inward-outward processing. I think the point that you finished on, Breda, is really interesting, and it relates to one of the questions that we've been asked about how long does it take to secure an authorisation. And I know in the presentation you covered the timeframes that are there, and I think from a revenue point of view it's important to point out that there's two elements. One, we will process it as quickly as possible, but the point that you made in terms of capacity, you know, we will aim to do it as quickly as possible, but if a lot of people start coming forward now, and there is a glut of them, we're clearly resourcing the function and anticipating this, but that's going to be a crunch point, is it? Is there any comment you'd like to make in terms of the length of time it would take?
Yeah, I suppose the first part is when the application comes in. I suppose if you're not sure when you're completing the customs decision system, maybe to make contact with us, because in a lot of cases the application that initially comes in doesn't have the full amount of information that we require. So if you want to make contact with us, the other thing really is it depends. Once we've accepted the application, the next step, as I was saying in the presentation, is the control officer will visit the company. And it really depends on, I suppose, how quickly that meeting can be arranged. And then when the control officer does the evaluation, what way the records are they in order for such an authorisation? And I think another very important thing to consider is you need a comprehensive guarantee for the inward processing. And if you're putting a cash deposit in place, that can be pretty quickly. But if you're getting an undertaking from a financial institution, you need to make contact with your financial institution at that stage when you're making the application. Now, we'll be covering that in session 10, but it's a very important point for the length of time it takes to actually issue an authorisation. So I suppose it depends, we process them as fast as we can, and we would say get the applications in now, and it depends then on the evaluation that's carried out when the control officers go.
So there's probably a couple of messages within that, and we certainly covered it a number of times yesterday in terms of everything that you're doing in the customs space. Make sure your information is accurate, make sure it's in with us on time. In terms of the bank element, the third party element, we can't control that from a time frame point of view. And I'm just struck as well by some of the things which you've mentioned in your response there, but also in your presentation, how much even this element crosses over with some of the other modules that we're covering. The import module that we covered yesterday, anyone who hasn't tuned into that should probably go back and have a look at that when that'll be on the website later on today. You've also talked about classification. That registration is still open for that session starting at 11:15. You've obviously the comprehensive guarantee, that's an important one. That's our last one today, that's at 6:15, 17:45. So registration's still open, so please feel free to jump in on that. Time is a little bit against us. I'm going to probably go through a couple of questions quite quickly, and Rose, I might actually come to you on a couple of them. I actually had a couple. Well, actually, let me start off. Can I hold an inward-outward processing, an inward and an outward processing authorisation? Can I hold both?
You can, yes.
Okay.
You can count as many as is necessary for your operations.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Can goods liable to excise duty be included under inward processing?
Yes, they can. Everything is suspended when you bring goods into IP, excise, VAT, duty, it's all suspended. There's nothing to be paid when you put the goods under the IP.
Great.
Yeah.
I have a buyer in another member state for my outward processing goods. Can they go straight to the buyer, or do they have to come back to me first?
No, they don't have to come back. But the one thing to remember, if they do go to another member state, that we have a new system, an INF system. You must draw up an INF.
What's
so
INF?
An INF is an information system. You put the information on the outward processing into the information system so that when the goods arrive in another member state back, say if the suits in the example arrive back into France, the French trader can go into the INF system. It's an EU system. They can sign off the INF. It's proof that the goods are coming back under OP because they're not coming back into the same country. Okay. Then that trader will have to pay the cost of the processing on the suits.
And is there more information on the INF in the pathway that Breda covered in her presentation?
The INF system is on the website.
Yeah.
All information is on the website for
Great.
it.
I'm pressing that because, in fairness, there were some comments back yesterday about the number of acronyms that we used, and I think we get so comfortable in our own space. So it's just to be sure, and particularly where this is new for people.
Yes.
So I think it probably is really important to look back on the slides, follow the information that's on the website, follow the pathway that Breda described, and we can reassure you that there really is a substantial amount of information and you will be able to find your way through that if this is new to you. Breda, you spoke a good bit about a bill of discharge early on in your presentation. For people who are new to this, what is it, who has it, what has to happen to it?
Yeah. So I suppose the initial visit, the control officer, when they're carrying out the evaluation of the application, they will run through with the company what exactly is required in a bill of discharge. It's actually set down in the EU legislation, the details we require. Now, it would include things such as you'd have to have your overall authorisation number, any details of any of your declarations that are declaring the goods into the procedure. It would include your period of discharge to show that you're discharging within the correct period of time. And then you'd have to show how you're discharging your procedure. So it could be an export declaration or a declaration to release the goods to the EU market. And again, your rate of yield would show as well, like if there's any goods maybe evaporated or whatever during the processing. So it gives all of that detail. And it can be, like, we decide at the initial stage the frequency of the bill of discharge, whether it's required monthly or quarterly. It kind of depends on the type of goods, the volume, the frequency, because we just have to be able to control and monitor the authorisation.
How will a business know that? Will that come out of the control officer evaluation?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that strikes me as that's going to be a really important relationship for any business, isn't it?
It is, and we find it's a very positive relationship.
Yeah.
Any of the companies that are authorised for the special procedures have a really good working relationship with their control officer.
It's probably that label is not as bad as it sounds
No,
in terms of control officer.
not at all.
It's actually really a facilitative type of
Yes,
role, isn't it?
yeah.
There is a supervisory element to it,
Yeah.
but it certainly is a facilitative thing.
Yeah,
We're trying to
definitely.
help businesses put these processes in place if they're going to benefit for their business model.
Exactly, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Rose, I might ask you another question that's come in. With the Northern Ireland Protocol, can we purchase from GB, enter the goods into inward processing, process in ROI. I'll come back on it.
Yeah.
Process in ROI and sell to NI.
You can. That's, you bring the goods in from GB, third country, you put them into your IP, you process them. However, the one thing about that is when you send the goods to Northern Ireland, you're not exporting. You're releasing to free circulation. Northern Ireland is staying within the EU. Therefore, if there's any duty and VAT or any charges due, you will have to pay them before they're sent to Northern Ireland. So it's not an export. Your duty and VAT will not be discharged by exportation. So you will have to release the goods and pay what's owed on the goods.
Okay, and that actually then we have another follow-up
Yeah.
linked question on exactly that point. With the Northern Ireland Protocol, can you confirm if it will not be necessary to use OP to send goods to Northern Ireland from ROI for processing, no duty
No.
crossing the border?
No OP is needed. That's just
Yeah.
movement within the EU.
Okay, and again, look, if there are businesses who want to explore that element with their own business model, the Brexit queries at revenue.ie, if you want to have a very specific question on that, in the constraints of this kind of a forum, we can't get into granular detail for each business model, but if anyone has a follow-up question with that, Brexit queries at revenue.ie, please feel free to use that. Can you outline how the invoicing works? Maybe Breda, you might take this one. Can you outline how the invoicing works for goods that have been placed under the inward processing authorisation? Has the duty to be paid and then claimed back?
No, if you have a full authorisation, if you're a regular user of the inward processing procedure, you have a full authorisation and the comprehensive guarantee is in place, and that's covering the actual suspended duty. So you don't pay anything at the time of importing the goods. The goods are processed, and then depending on how they're discharged, like some processed products may have some duty. It could be a lower rate or it could be zero. So if you're releasing them to the EU market, it's when you're releasing them to free circulation on the EU market, either you might have a reduced rate of duty or a zero rate of duty. But if you export them back out of the EU directly from the inward processing, the liability is discharged. So really, I didn't go into the detail of this in the presentation, but if you're an ad hoc user of inward processing, you can declare goods to inward processing by declaration. That would mean that the guarantee, the duty would be held on deposit when your declaration is submitted. And then when you discharge the procedure, you would get the refund of the deposit. But really what we were talking about today is people who are regular users of the procedure and they need a full authorisation. So if you're just doing it as a once-off or ad hoc, the duty would be taken on deposit at the point of import.
Okay.
But otherwise it's not. The comprehensive guarantee covers it.
Great, okay.
Yeah.
And as you said, there is a separate, more detailed presentation later on today at 5:45. Just to mention, I understand that there has been some technical difficulties this morning, so apologies for that. I understand that they have been rectified now. We'll revisit that and see what we need to do, if we need to do anything in terms of making the earlier presentation available, but apologies for that. Rose, can I come back to you then? If our business based in ROI order supplies from the UK, a UK-based company, do we need to carry out inward processing?
If they're carrying out some sort of manufacturing
element.
yes, they would, yes.
If you have a product shipping to the UK for processing, do you need an authorisation? And if not, what duty, etc., will have to be paid?
If they're coming back, they would need outward processing. If it's just an export for manufacture in the UK and the goods are not coming back, no, you don't need anything. But if you want to bring the goods back as a processed product or having something done to them for the EU market, yes, you need an outward processing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you might actually follow up with this one, Rose. There's a query from the aviation aerospace sector, and what implications or applicability is there for inward or outward processing for that sector? Quite a general, broad question.
Yeah,
but,
well, this
I know
end use is a good procedure for aircraft parts. You know, we have,
and that's actually the next session that we have
yes,
coming
it
up.
is.
So
Yeah.
whoever has come in on that one, the end use is probably the more
It is,
appropriate one.
yes.
So we will certainly come back to you, and feel free to raise any additional questions under that one. So somebody is asking whether or not there's any help in terms of submitting an application, but I think that probably brings us back to the control officer. And Breda, you certainly indicated that if people, because of the importance of having the documentation correct, that people really should seek advice before they submit anything, rather than trying to retrofit an application.
Definitely, like our team in the Special Procedures Unit, they often help companies in submitting the application. And as I mentioned in the presentation, we can't see the trader portal. Now we have a kind of a test that we can look at, but we can't see exactly what the trader is inputting, but we can guide them through it to get a fully completed application in. And definitely, I think if you're having problems with that, get in touch with us, because we can guide you through it quite quickly.
Great.
So it would be worthwhile.
Yeah. Do you need a quota for farmed? This may or may not be on the agri side, but Rose, you might take this one. Do you need a quota for farmed salmon from the UK if I use inward processing?
It depends if there's a quota attached to the CN code.
Okay.
It depends for fish, it's mainly more end use than it is inward processing. If there's an end use code, it's more preferable to use the end use than to put it into inward processing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So people really need to explore their model, their projects, what they're doing with them, and to see what applies.
Yes.
And again, referring back to the website of what
Yes.
additional information is there. Can I use another company to do some of the work for me under inward processing? And do they have to be in Ireland?
You can use other companies, but they must be set down in the authorisation. I mean, if you can bring your product to a certain level and you have maybe a sister company or another company that will take it further and actually finish the processing, that's allowed, so long as it's written into the authorisation. You cannot use a company that's not set down in your authorisation, and they don't have to be in Ireland. They can be in any member state.
Okay, okay, great. That's
But
good to know.
the important thing is they must be set down in the authorisation.
Okay,
Yeah.
so stipulated in advance
Yes,
that they are.
yes.
So I think really then some of the important points coming from this, there are more questions, but really I think we're gone slightly over time, so we'll have to wrap it up. But it's follow the information that Brida's covered in the presentation, follow the pathway on the website to where you'll find the information on this topic. Engage with the
Yes.
control officer in terms of what we need to do, how you need to do it. Get the application in. If a comprehensive guarantee, you really need to be getting those applications in as soon as possible to make sure that they're processed in plenty of time in advance of the 1st of January.
Yeah.
And then the Brexit queries at revenue.ie with business-specific questions.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Breda. Thank you very much, Rose. And for everybody, we'll see you at the next session, which is starting at 9:45 on customs warehousing and end use. So thanks very much.